All right, today's lesson is lesson 5.2 from the Decimals and Fractions book. If you're in Mrs. Walker's class and you're filling out your notebook, this lesson is lesson notes are on page 44. So you might want to pause this and fill in your table of contents. The title of the lesson is, well, lesson 5.2, and it is multiplying fractions. And the beauty of multiplying fractions, after you've finished all of the work of learning how to add and subtract fractions, multiplying fractions and dividing fractions is much simpler. You don't have to find all the common denominators, and as long as you have the reducing, simplifying of fractions down, this part's going to be a piece of cake. Anyway, on lesson 5.2 we had warm up 4 problems. So warm up 1, 2, 3, and 4. And boy, they're real toughies today. Warm up problems are 5 times 7, 8 times 9, 14 divided by 2, and 15 divided by 3. All right, those are sitting there because they're meant to make you be thinking about what it means to reduce fractions. Our I can statement today is I can find products. I can find products involving 2 fractions. I can find products involving 2 fractions. All right. Okay, so that's our I can statement. Under the I can statement, I like to draw a dark green line separating our warm up from our notes. And then we'll get started on the notes. So, notes today. I have just 1 cutout notes that I need to glue right there in our usual starting place. We don't always put them right there at the very beginning, but often. So tiny tap holes in the corners. Very small little smear of glue is all that the magic of Elmer's requires. Alright, so I'll flip it over and put it right into the corner here. Press it, and then we'll talk about what these instructions are telling us about our lesson today. So it's all about multiplying fractions. So I'll take my yellow highlighter and highlight multiplying fractions. All right, so I'm going to do something real quick here on the little notes cutout. It won't make sense right at first, but like we often do, we'll just do some marking up of this, and then we'll do explaining out to the side. So first thing I want you to do is take your green highlighter pen and just highlight that AC that's right there. And then with your blue one, highlight the BD that's right there. All right. And then with your black colored pencil, make a fraction bar that's real dark like this right here. And then with your green highlighter pen, make a box above the fraction bar, and with your blue one, a box below the fraction bar. So a numerator box in green and a denominator box in blue. So what this is telling you is that when we multiply fractions, we're taking the numerators and we're multiplying them and putting the answer there, and the denominators, and we multiply them and we put the answer there. We have to do something called cross-reducing first, but I'll get to that in a minute. Right down here, it's talking about something we're going to come back to later, where you see that word of. Okay, we'll come back to that in a little bit. But right now, I just want to put a couple of practice problems out to the side to show you how this works, okay? So here we go. Our first problem, I'm going to skip one line here. Our first problem is 3/4 times 5/8. Now, this is something, if you're in my class, this might be new to you, or you might have heard me talk about it before. At this point, you're going to see me make a multiplication symbol here as a dot. We'll be teaching that soon. As soon as we start our Intro to Algebra book, we'll kind of drop this X as the meaning of multiplying and start using parentheses and this dot more often. So I'm just going to introduce it now because it just feels more natural to me. So just know when you see this dot, that means multiply, just the same as this little X does. All right, so when we were doing the markup of our little notes box over here, I told you that we multiply the numerator straight across, and then we multiply the denominator straight across. So I'm going to have a fraction bar right here, and 3 times 5 is 15, and 4 times 8 is 32. So what I wound up doing is I multiplied 3 times 5 to get my answer here. And then I multiplied 4 times 8 to get my answer here. And then the last thing I always look for is, can this fraction be simplified? And this fraction cannot be simplified. It is already in its simplest form. So I'm going to circle it with my red pencil. And that's how you multiply fractions. Now, that's the simplest version of how it can be done, because now we need to talk about something called cross multiply. All right? So here's our next problem. It is, did I say cross multiply? I meant cross reduce. All right, 6/11 times 2/3. All right, now think of this as reducing a fraction, only now we're going to look at things diagonally. So when I look diagonally at these two here, the 2 and the 11, if they were a fraction, is there any way we could reduce that, simplify that? And no, there isn't. But if I look at the 6 and the 3, if that was a fraction, could I simplify that? And yes, I can. And so with my orange pencil, I'm gonna cross reduce these. That means that 3 can go into itself 1 time, and 3 can go into 6 2 times. All right, 2 times. So now those reduced numbers are the numbers that we will multiply across, which is nice because it means then that we're dealing with much smaller numbers. So 2 times 2 is 4, and 11 times 1 is 11. And so now I have 4/11. So after I cross reduced, I still did the same thing where I multiplied across with the numerators, and then I multiplied across with the denominators, but this time I just did it with the cross-reduced numbers, much smaller. Now I look at my final fraction, what I think is my answer, double check to see, can this be reduced any further? And no, it cannot. So this 4/11 is a simplified fraction, and so it is the answer to 6/11 times 2/3. All right, so that's what cross-reducing looks like. Well, let's look at one more example of cross-reducing, and this one is going to be 2/15 times 5/6. 2/15 times 5/6, and that's going to equal something. But before we multiply across, we need to cross-reduce. So with my orange pencil, I'm going to look diagonally again, and I'm going to first look at this 5 and 15. If that was a fraction of 5/15, you'd know just what to do, right? 5 goes into itself once, and 5 goes into 15 3 times, all right? But we can look at diagonal on the other set here too, 2 6. We can cross reduce those as well, because 2 can go into itself once and 2 can go into 6 3 times. Now we have much smaller numbers that we're going to multiply across. We multiply the cross-reduced numbers of the numerators. 1 times 1 is 1, and 3 times 3 is 9. So I'm going to get my pens here just to show what I did. I multiplied 1 times 1, and of course got 1. And I multiplied 3 times 3, and of course got 9. All right, and then I look at that fraction one last time. Can 1/9 be further reduced? No, it's in its simplified form. So I will circle that with my red pencil. That's how we multiply fractions. Now, if I'm not going to have an example here, but one thing to look for, we'll talk about how even after we've done our cross-reduce, if you do all of the cross-reducing that you're supposed to do here, you most of the time will get a fully simplified answer here. That's not always true, because sometimes you might get an improper fraction. And if this was an improper fraction, well then, we've learned back when we were adding, subtracting fractions, that an improper fraction cannot be your answer. You need to turn that into a mixed number. So that might happen. But sometimes you might see a cross reducing and you'll just kind of miss one of the other ones. And so your final answer won't be simplified all the way. And so remembering to always double check what you think is your final answer and making sure that it has been simplified is really important. So let's make ourselves a couple of notes here down at the bottom of the page. So with a big red star here, a couple of notes. I'm going to get my light green pencil, and in capital letters I'm going to write always, always. And I'm getting my dark blue pencil, I think. Doesn't really matter. Dark blue pencil will work. Violet pencil will work, but I think this is a dark blue. Is it? Oh, it's hard for me to tell. All right, so always cross-reduce. That's what we did up here with our orange pencil, going diagonal on our two fractions to see how they can be reduced. Always cross-reduce before, and I'm going to underline that with my red pencil, before multiplying across. Now, if you don't cross-reduce, let me write this down. All right. Always cross-reduce before multiplying. Now, if you don't cross-reduce before you multiply, you can still get to the correct answer. It's just that your numbers that you're dealing with can be much bigger. And then you still have to simplify the fraction at the end. By cross-reducing before multiplying, you break your numbers down into much smaller numbers to work with, and your chances of making multiplying mistakes are lesser then, just easier to work with. So always cross-reduce before multiplying across. Now, the second rule that we're going to have, and we've had this rule before, you know, I talk about it a lot, already did in this lesson. We are going to always check, oh, get my pencil from rolling off. All right, always check that your answer is fully simplified. Fully simplified. I'm going to underline that in red. Fully simplified before done, before you decide you're done. And that's what I was talking about, how, you know, you might wind up with a improper fraction. That's not fully simplified. If you didn't fully cross-reduce, you would wind up with an answer that is not fully simplified. So before multiplying across, you're going to cross-reduce always. Always, you're going to check what you think is your final answer and make sure that it is fully simplified before you're done. Now, with my red pencil, I'm going to go back to this little notes cutout here, and I'm going to circle this word that is in quotes there, of. It says the word of can mean multiplication. What this means is that if I ask you what is 1/2 of 2/3, that's the same thing as saying 1/2 times 2/3. Okay, so you'll see that mostly in word problems. They'll ask you what is a certain fraction of another number, and that simply means you're going to be doing then a multiplication problem. All right, so those are our notes for this lesson. If you want to pause here to work on something, this would be a good point to do that. The next thing that I'm going to do is put up some practice problems. And the practice problems, I'd like you to, if you want to get some practice, if all you needed to do was see the notes here, you're fine. But if you'd like to get some practice, I'm putting up some problems that you can work out now on a piece of paper of your own. And so go ahead and pause while you do that, and then unpause, and you can watch me walk through the practice problems. All right, so let's switch out the notes now and put the practice problems up. Let's see, I better zoom out a little bit. There we go. All right, so that should have practice. Oh, let's see. Problems 1 through 5, I believe, are in frame. You may go ahead and pause. And then problem number 6 is now in frame. Okay, so we'll work these problems out with you. Starting with this problem number 1 that says 3/4 times 1/2. So I look across diagonally to see 1 and 4. Can that be cross-reduced? No, there isn't anything that I can evenly divide into 1 and 4 that would simplify it. 1, but we would never use 1. It wouldn't change anything. 2 and 3, no, again, nothing. So I'm going to multiply the numerators straight across, and I will have 3. And multiply the denominators straight across, and I will have 8. And there is not a number that I can divide evenly into both 3 and 8, so I know this fraction here is in its simplest form. The answer then is 3/8. All right, the next one then. Looking across 6 and 7, no, there's no way I can reduce 6 and 7. But 5 and 10, yes, I can. So 5 goes into itself 1 time, and 5 goes into 10 2 times. So now I have 1 times 7 is 7, and 6 times 2 is 12. And I look at my final fraction there. Can I reduce that any further? There is not a number that can evenly go into 7 and 12. And so I will circle 7/12 as my answer. All right, the next one, 1/15 and 5/6. Well, 1 and 6 is as reduced as it's going to get. But 5 and 15 can be reduced. So 5 goes into itself once, 5 goes into 15 3 times. And now I have 1 times 1 is 1, 3 times 6 is 18. 1/18, of course, is as simple as you can get. And so I will circle my answer there. All right. Okay, so I'm going to move up here a little bit. We've got problem number 4. I'm going to look at 4 and 12. I know that 4 is a factor of 12, so it will go into itself 1 time, and it will go into 12 3 times. And if I look across this way, it seems to me when I look at 3 and 13, there should be some way to reduce it. Because I think it's just that common numeral there of 3 that makes me think that. But there isn't. So 3 times 3 is 9. And 1 times 13 is 13. And 9 thirteenths cannot be reduced any further. So it is in its simplified form. All right, number 5. Number 5, let's see. If I look across at 4 and 16, yes, 4 can go into itself once, and 4 can go into 16 4 times. 9 and 15, is there anything that can go evenly into those numbers? Well, I know 9 can't go into 15, but 3 can go into 9 and also 15. So 3 goes into 9 3 times, and 3 goes into 15 5 times. So that simplified things quite a bit. Now I have 5 times 1 is 5, and 4 times 3 is 12. And there aren't any, and 5/12 is already in its simplest form. So I'll circle that in red. And then our final problem was a word problem. And it read, Camden made 3/4 of his shots at basketball practice. Trent made 2/5 of the number of shots that Camden made. What fraction of shots did Trent make? Now, what they're really saying is, this is where we get back to that word of, meaning multiply. So what we're asking is 2/5 of 3/4 equals, and then we'll have the answer. So we'll set that up as 2/5 of, or we're going to put in the multiplication symbol there, 2/5 of 3/4. All right. And so, like always, we'll look to see if we can cross-reduce, and we can. 2 goes into itself once. 2 goes into 4 2 times. Nothing we can do with 3 and 5, so we're ready to multiply across. 1 times 3 is 3. 5 times 2 is 10. 10 is in its simplest form. This is a word problem, and so our answer would be Trent made 3/10 of Camden's shots. And as we always do in my class, our final answer is circled in red. That's our final answer on that one. Okay, so for the 5.2 worksheet, the whole top section here, just a collection of problems that look just like the ones that I showed you in the notes. Remember that you will need to show your work, show how you cross-reduce first if you can, and sometimes you can't. Remember that sometimes you'll have problems like this where there isn't any cross-reducing that you can do. So when you get to a problem like that, don't think you're just not seeing it. Sometimes it's not there. But you need to show your work, show where you cross it out, and put down what you cross-reduce to. And remember, at the bottom of our notes, we said always check that your final answer, what you think is your final answer, is in fact fully simplified. Now, up here, or down here in this section where we use this table, read the instructions carefully. In fact, I would take your pencil and underline a certain part. It says that students at Mackenzie Middle School took a survey that looked at classes students enjoyed. The fraction of each grade that said they enjoyed a specific subject is shown in the table below. Use this information to solve the problem. Now here's the part I wanted you to underline. The fraction of students that said they enjoyed a specific subject. So these fractions down here already mean these kids enjoyed the specific subject. So, like in number 13 where it says, Mrs. Keyes found that 7/8 of the 6th graders that said they enjoyed math, remember they all said they enjoyed one of these subjects, that said they enjoyed math had received high grades in math class. What fraction of the 6th graders received high grades and enjoyed math? Don't get messed up about that and enjoyed math thing. If they're in this table, they enjoyed that subject. So all we're really looking for is 6th graders, the fraction of the 6th graders that said that they enjoyed math. All right, so 6th graders, math, we're looking at 1/4, which is going to be multiplied by 7/8. All right, so it's going to be the same in all of these. You just need to pay careful attention to what grade are they talking about and what subject are they talking about, so that you're looking at the right fraction from the table that you multiply with the fraction in the individual problems. Okay, and last, I will put up the exit ticket for this lesson. Set this aside. I'll zoom in on it, and this is where you can test yourself. You can always ask me the next day for answers, or get with a friend and get with a parent or someone that might know how to do these and see what you think. Okay, so that's lesson 5.2. Remember, The only way to learn math is to do math, and mistakes are proof that you are learning.